Deion Sanders is in communication with the Dallas Cowboys for their head coaching job, but that might not be Deion's best fit in the NFL. We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to today's edition of Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Wednesday by Locked On NFL expert, the brain, Luke Braun. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Rams' chances of keeping their momentum going against the Eagles. We're going to talk about Sam Darnold in the Minnesota Vikings' future, and we're going to discuss Deion Sanders, Jerry Jones, Dallas Cowboys head coaching position. I'm not sure if the Cowboys actually are the best fit for Deion in the NFL. Now, before we get into all of that, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Luke, we got the news during the game. Obviously, you were probably locked into the game pretty well with the Vikings taking on the Rams, but we got news during the game because the NFL had to come and save us from a
I genuinely didn't even know about this until you told me about it pre-show.
Great. Perfect. Deion Sanders and the Dallas Cowboys have been in contact, and the internet and the football cognoscenti I saw you use the other day, such a great phrase.
Dan Hansusism.
Yeah, Dan Hanzus is in a tizzy right now over the possibility that Deion Sanders would join the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the question becomes, how real is it? Our guys over at Locked On Cowboys have their doubts.
It's a lots of sound and fury signifying nothing is this whole situation, right? Like it's a completely media driven thing. This is not a real, I don't think a real situation where Deion is actually being considered here. I think that little quote from Deion kind of gives the game away. It's nice. It's so nice to hear from Jerry Jones. I love it when I get his phone calls. Like he doesn't text with Jerry regularly or like it was some kind of official phone call or whatever. Yeah. Come on. This whole situation to me is a chance for the Cowboys. Again, I know no one has ever seen this before, but a chance for the Cowboys to insert themselves back into the front page. Listen, they were talking about this story at halftime of the playoff game that was on last night. I think mission accomplished, Jerry.
Yeah,
mission accomplished.
Look, there are definitely some hurdles here. I think that Deion Sanders has said, I remember the interview, has said publicly that he would consider coming to coach in the NFL if that team was willing to take his son at quarterback. The problem with the Cowboys situation is to do that, they would have to get rid of Dak Prescott. That's a $100 million dead cap. You would have to find a trade for Dak Prescott. You would have to make a trade up to number 1 overall to ensure that you get Shadur Sanders. Some are like, well, he could just, decline every team and push his way down the board. I think that maybe works with 2 or 3 picks, but you ain't having that with 12 picks down to the Dallas Cowboys. So I guess, Luke, you're a very logical person. How real do you think this Deion to Dallas thing could be?
I feel like I know. Landon nailed it, I think. We know the Dallas Cowboys to do this sometimes, to just drum up a fancy headline just to get some attention and then let it quietly fade away into the mist. It also, I don't know. It's I wouldn't put it past Jerry Jones to do something like this because I think in his old age, he's all about glitz and nothing about substance. And that's the problem with the Cowboys. That's why they're bad. And it's why I don't think they'll be good until Jerry Jones departs this earth. But so I could see him doing something like this. I don't know if Deion's whole deal works with 30-year-old professionals. Kind of reminds me of when Nick Saban got to the league in Miami and it's this doesn't work here. It worked great with 21-year-olds, but not necessarily with seasoned professionals that could probably teach you as much as you could teach them about this defense or whatever.
Yeah, I think Deion Sanders' approach works a lot better in college because it's about recruiting. It's about inspiring. It's about, leading young men how to be good men, not so much like the intricacies of football and all of that. But I do think even if Deion does come to the NFL, I think the Raiders are a much better fit. They have a much easier path to get his son. They have an actual need at the quarterback position that won't lose them $100 million in cap space if they make that move. So I think the Raiders would be a better fit. If you were the Raiders and Tom Brady and all that, would you consider Deion Sanders?
If I were the Raiders, I think I'd sink into the void. I don't know what's right for them. I think,
The black hole?
what? Yeah, a true black hole where dreams
There
go
you
to
go.
die. If you do the Deion thing, you're doing the Deion thing. It would be kind of like the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, where like that's got to be a long-term deal. And I think there's like a cash issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, there's an $8 million buyout at Colorado that someone would have to pay for Deion Sanders to be an option for him. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to pay Deion,
you're still
Sanders
paying $10 million a year to Gruden, man.
Yeah, that's very true for an owner that's not super cash rich at the end of the day. But now with Tom Brady backing him, who knows? I do want to move to a different head coaching prospect, and it's Mike McCarthy. And now that Mike McCarthy is free, sure, I think a lot of people are pairing him with the Chicago Bears, and that's something Lauren Cox, who was on the show with us yesterday, talked about on his show, Locked On Bears.
On the one hand, you have Mike McCarthy re-entering the mix when initially the Bears thought they weren't going to get a chance to interview Mike McCarthy, and now he's a legitimate, serious candidate, and one that feels to me like the kind of candidate the Bears typically would go for in this situation. But also, it creates another new head coach opening for the Bears to compete with, another potential landing spot for the likes of Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or any other coach not named Mike McCarthy the Bears might want to pursue. And you can make some arguments that maybe the Cowboys are the most attractive opening, or certainly one of the most attractive openings, right up there with the Chicago Bears. So we'll kind of get a sense of how this all comes together as the Bears also just keep adding more names to their head coaching interview list. But right away, the immediate impact is that the Bears can and will interview Mike McCarthy.
And I think Mike McCarthy is the best fit for the Chicago Bears. I know that he's not a name that inspires a lot of excitement. Lauren actually explained it very well later in his episode that people don't look at Mike McCarthy as some scheme guru, and people don't look at Mike McCarthy as an exciting fit. But for a young quarterback in Caleb Williams who needs stability, who needs experience, who needs somebody, as you have pointed out, Luke, to just teach him the fundamentals and how to do this and not just throw him out there and rely on his natural skill set. I think Mike McCarthy may not be the guy to get the Bears to a Super Bowl, but I think Mike McCarthy might be a great coach to get Caleb Williams' career back on track.
I don't hate this at all for the Bears, if that's the case. Right. I my only hesitation is thinking about that we said the exact same stuff about John Fox for them a few years ago, and that sort of crashed and burned, and they never managed to kind of take that next step to go from.
I would just say Fox is a defensive guy. You know what I mean? So he doesn't have that connection.
It's the same experience, culture, but I do think the Bears are dealing with the same issues that plagued them when they needed post Mark Trestman, right? They were coming off Mark Trestman, who was a big disaster, and he was an offensive guy. So was Matt Nagy. Nothing works for them.
Right. And maybe something more than the head coach that's the problem here.
Yeah, maybe we have to pay attention to something different than what side of the ball the guy came from. Just saying. But the McCarthy thing would be to fix the culture of the Bears. I think that's the biggest problem plaguing them. If you can't fix the culture, you can't fix Caleb, and if you can't fix Caleb, the culture is going to only get worse. And you're going to be staring at another hard reset nuke button in 2 years.
Right.
And I do think McCarthy can do that. I think he's a good coach that can get he can get people into the right spot at the right time. Whether that'll be the most innovative thing in the world, maybe not. But I think from an outside perspective, we focus too much on how he doesn't do what we want him to do on fourth down, and less on the fact that he's got his players doing the right thing most of the time, and the Bears aren't there. They could use that, and then maybe stepping stone to something bigger.
It's stable, and I think that's really what they need right now. And you look at Dallas. Dallas won more games down the stretch than people expected. Their players continue to play hard. Cooper Rush had some decent moments where he looked all right. I mean, they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who went to the playoffs. So I just think that while Mike McCarthy is not the most exciting, shiny toy, he's just a nice, solid, dependable guy. And I think that's what the Bears truly need more than anything right now. But with that being said, we gotta knock on Luke's expertise here, because the Minnesota Vikings and what happens next for them and Sam Darnold is so interesting. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives to blowouts, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. I can promise you the Steelers-Ravens game was boring, and FanDuel made it so exciting. I was cheering late in the fourth quarter because of FanDuel. So right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays. Of course, they have the money lines, the spreads, the over-unders, player props, and so much more. Make sure that you check out FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Again, for me, the playoffs could never be better than when I'm watching with FanDuel. So make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Deion Sanders, Dallas Cowboys situation, Mike McCarthy and the Chicago Bears. Now I want to move back into the playoff action. And the Minnesota Vikings obviously had a very, very disappointing loss. And the goal here is not to make Luke sad all over again, but we would be foolish to not use this expertise for the biggest football story in the NFL. Luke, I have to ask, first and foremost, we got your instant reaction yesterday in the postcast clip, but what was your thoughts on why that game went the way that it did, and how much of it is truly Sam Darnold's fault, which seems like the easy thing to do is to blame Sam Darnold?
I tweeted it out, and I think I stand by it with a day of distance from it. I think they lost that game on Tuesday. When they came up with the game plan, when they came up with what they were going to do, I think that game was lost. They lost that. They walked into that game not as ready to play as the Rams did. And they didn't attack the Rams the way I thought you should attack the Rams with some of the stuff the Rams do. So the way the Rams use their backside edges, they almost never have those guys look at the quarterback. They either protect him with an overhang or they have someone from depth do it. And
so they crash down real hard to the inside.
Yes, right. They crash real hard. So if you have a read option team, I think you can exploit that. If you have a rollout team, you can exploit that. And the Vikings used very little of that like rollout stuff. They tried one early. It was blanketed up because they didn't get the coverage that they wanted, and then they kind of just went to straight drop play passes, which are very long drop backs. O-line couldn't hang up, and they didn't really give those edges anything to think about. So Jared Verse could just tee off all day long. Yeah, and you kind of saw what happened there.
That's what happened. Yeah.
That's a more nitty gritty critique. I think they Sam Darnold played it doesn't have to be rocket science, man. He played bad. He didn't see the field. He was extraordinarily hesitant. Deer in headlights is the phrase that kept coming up for me.
Seeing ghosts.
Certainly not the only. I think it's different. Seeing ghosts is you're seeing something that's not there. Deer in headlights is the moment is I'm crumbling under the moment and I cannot read what is in front of me. And I think that's kind of what happened. But the coaches didn't put him in a position to succeed either. They made it hard on him. They made him hold the ball a long time, and then he holds it longer than they were even asking him to, and then you get a sack in 7 seconds. So it was kind of just impossible for everybody, and that starts with the coaching staff. It was a top-down failure.
Well, all of that has been offense. I think the defensive side of the ball was incredibly disappointing for Minnesota too.
For kind of the same reasons. Yeah.
Right. Is Brian Flores's exotic style of defense something that can work in the playoffs when you have better coaches and when you have better quarterbacks? I wonder if Flores can kind of bully some of the lesser quarterbacks and some of the lesser coaches in the NFL, but when you get to the higher level, his exotic blitz scheme doesn't confuse good coaches quite as much as it does maybe the lesser coaches in the NFL. Do you think that's barking up the right tree, or do you think it's something completely different?
I have a super weird answer to this, and I think it's better in the AFC if he goes to the AFC than in the NFC, because who are the good quarterbacks in the NFC? Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, guys that get the ball out quick, guys that time it, guys that, deliver darts over the middle of the field and use the whole field, and timing and rhythm, and is precise executors.
Right.
Who are the good quarterbacks in the AFC? Guys that run around all the time and improvise.
Mahomes,
those
Lamar,
improv quarterbacks,
those are quarterbacks though.
They're better, but stylistically,
right,
it's a lot harder for those guys to beat, like zone, back off zone defenses with someone chasing them all the time. Those quarterbacks excel against man coverage where the defense is turning their back to you. So I kind of think that it works better there, but as it stands right now, you'll never beat the Lions and Rams if you base out of a 6-man coverage, which is what the Vikings do. But I'll give him this, because this time last year, the Vikings were eliminated and there were existential issues with Brian Flores' defense, and I genuinely didn't know what a solution would even be, let alone whether or not he could find it. And he found it, and he had a top 5 defense all year long with this. So maybe he goes back in the lab and he figures out a way to cover better with 6 men, or to rush better with 4 guys, which the Vikings don't really have the horses.
That's
to
the
do.
real answer, in my opinion, Luke. You need to get
this was a roster that was supposed to win 4 games, remember?
Yeah,
I mean, their cornerbacks are Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin. I mean, they got corpses out there. And so I think lost in all of this is Flores coaching that group to this, put a little bit of talent on the secondary, and then maybe we got a stew cooking, but it all might be a moot point because, who knows if Brian Flores takes a job with the Bears or the Jets or the Jags or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's spin forward. We're obviously already starting that spin forward with what Flores needs to do with Sam Darnold. I think I've seen some of your takes this morning online. Are you completely done with Sam Darnold in Minnesota? There's no circumstance where you would want him back for any cost or anything like that. And if that is the truth, what do you think is next for him if it's not Minnesota?
You're going to have to ask again in a week when the emotions have gone. I'm a little, the emotions are still there, and I won't apologize for that. That's like a core part of being, of enjoying football. But it feels to me like the first 16 games were very good, but similar to the point you made about Flores, when the going got tough, you got smoked. When the pressure was on in that Detroit game, it wasn't even the competition, because he played better against Detroit the first time and better against the Rams the first time. He fell apart the second time when the pressure was on, when the lights were bright. And
well, that's what I mean. The stakes. I mean, maybe
the stakes.
The stakes were higher. Yeah, that's the right.
It wasn't necessarily the quality of team. They played, I would even say, better defenses, but and played them tough. But the stakes got high, and then he couldn't read it anymore. He's not used to the stakes being high in the NFL. He's never been in a meaningful Week 18 game before or a playoff game before.
Right. That's true.
So you kind of have this crossroads. If you're buying into Sam Darnold, you have to answer the question, okay, is he like just bad under that high stakes, or was he just new to it and he'll get better with us? You got to kind of make that judgment call, and you probably have to talk to him to do it. And so that's tough. That's a decision that I can't make having not met the guy. But I don't think that, I think that collapse in the last 2 games of the season was enough for the Vikings to go, good luck. Have fun on the market. Thanks for the comp pick. We're going with the rookie. I think that's where they're going to be at. And the way the media is talking about, and what the media has been allowed to publish, is running some interference for Kevin O'Connell and sort of throwing Sam Darnold under the bus, if I were to put my tinfoil hat on.
Interesting. Well,
I read what's at The Athletic right now and understand that the Vikings PR staff is very restrictive about what they'll let people like Mike Silver put in an article. And Mike Silver will cooperate with that. So if it's in there, that means the Vikings are okay with you seeing it.
Very, very interesting. But I agree with you. I think Darnold is done in Minnesota. But I still think, regardless of the last 2 games, the lack of solid quarterback options in the NFL and this draft class not being highly touted, I think that'll lead to Sam Darnold still getting a starting opportunity next year. And again,
maybe he has to beat someone now, but he'll still definitely be somewhere.
he might not be given a starting job. It would be a competition thing, like, Sam Darnold and Will Levis. Let's see what happens there, dear God. But with that being said, we will move forward. Playoff football this weekend. We got our matchups. Let's talk about some upset potential. Before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing so many hats, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data that you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to connections that you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates. I know from experience how important it is to make the right hiring decisions. Having access to insights like what skills candidates have, how connected they are to your network, that can help you feel confident to pull the trigger. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Luke, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Talked about the Cowboys situation with Deion Sanders and why I think the Raiders are actually a better fit for primetime. We talked about the Minnesota Vikings path forward, Sam Darnold's path forward, probably without Minnesota as well. Now let's talk about some of these games that are going to take place this weekend. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber himself, in the barbershop, chopping up all the best NFL topics. But Luke, I think that as Lauren and I discussed last night, that most people would agree that the Bills have the best chance of maybe getting an upset this weekend. They're home underdogs to the Baltimore Ravens, but that seems so obvious. So what I want to do is kind of eliminate the Bills and Ravens game from discussion here and talk about which of the other three underdogs actually have the best chance to get an upset. And according to Lauren, it's the Los Angeles Rams, and they're coming off, again, a big-time win over the Minnesota Vikings. My guy Doug McCain from Locked On Rams talked about that.
So who's going to text Dan Campbell to tell him that the Rams won? He said he was going to see the Vikings in 2 weeks. He might be seeing the Rams in 2 weeks if they continue to play like they did on Monday night. They beat the Vikings 27-9, but that doesn't tell the whole story. That doesn't tell you how dominant of a win this was for LA. He had 6 sacks on Sam Darnold in the first half. That was the most sacks on any quarterback in the first half of a playoff game in 25 years. Aaron Donald was in the building. I'm not so sure that number 99 wasn't playing. They had Sam Darnold seeing goes quick, and you saw this Rams offense that struggled in the first quarter all season long. They were 31st in first quarter scoring. They scored 10 points in the first quarter, and they held this Vikings team that was second in the league in first quarter scoring to just 2 first downs. This Rams team won this game in the first half, and yes, everyone's going to count them out against the Eagles. That's exactly where this Rams team likes to be. You count this team out, that's when they come up big, and this team, no one wants to play them. This is a dangerous football team.
All right, listen, we'll just do this. Do you agree with him? Do you think the Rams have the second best chance of getting an upset this weekend?
After the Bills. Yes, I think I do. Because the other teams, the Commanders going into play Detroit off a bye, and the Texans going into play KC off a bye. I think just the fact that that those teams are coming off of rest, and obviously, Patrick Mahomes, I think the Lions are the best team in the NFL right now. Mm-hmm. And I think the Eagles showed some blemishes against that Packers team. The Packers fell apart, discipline, had all kinds of their own issues. A lot of their ugly stuff reared its head, just like it did in Minnesota, that had plagued them all year. But the Eagles didn't, they could have won that one by 41-10.
Yes.
They absolutely left a lot of meat on the bone. So if we're just going based on how everybody's been playing right now, right? It's probably easy to say that, the Rams can come in and do that. And I don't know, Matt, I've said it all week long leading up to this one. Matt Stafford in the playoffs is a different beast.
That's very true. And look, I've been high on the Rams for the last 6 weeks. I was hyping them up at the end of the regular season. Like, if any team that's kind of on the low end, I mean, the Rams were out of the playoffs, and I was like, they're one of my picks for making a deep run kind of out of nowhere. But I got to tell you, Luke, I've been soul searching and thinking about this game for 36 hours now. I think the Rams are going to get smoked by Philadelphia. I think that is going to be the biggest margin of victory the entire weekend. And it's styles make fights. You're not wrong, but what do the Rams have good? Good wide receivers, great cornerbacks in Philadelphia. What do the Rams do well on defense? Pass rush, 9 sacks, all of that. They have a pedestrian secondary talent. Well, who has the best offensive line in the NFL? Maybe the Philadelphia Eagles.
Detroit, but yeah.
I mean, it's a conversation there. But my point is I think that everything that the Rams do very well is negated specifically by what the Eagles do very well. And the Rams haven't been the best run defense either. So I think that plays in to what Philly does. I think that Philadelphia is going to smash the Rams this weekend. And I actually would go with the Texans as my second most likely upset. Why? Styles make fights. What's the worst thing about the Kansas City Chiefs right now if you had to pick a position group?
I'm fairly unfamiliar with the Chiefs, but are they hurt on the secondary? You tell me.
The offensive line. They've been terrible all year, especially that left tackle position has really, really struggled. Jawan Taylor, overpaid, not a great player. I think the Houston Texans' best asset is their defensive line with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry. And I think that if there's anything that can get who is tested, like think about the Broncos when they should have won that game over the Kansas City Chiefs and they missed the field goal. The Broncos defensive line got after Mahomes, and that is the great equalizer of a great quarterback in the NFL is pass rush. And I think if there's anything, the biggest weakness of the Chiefs is the biggest strength of the Texans. And the one thing that can really throw the Chiefs off is getting Patrick Mahomes on the ground, and the Texans can do it. I think that game is way closer than people are thinking.
I think, yeah. I thought I had a completely different order than you, and in fact, it's just switching these two games is the only disagreement. I don't trust the Texans that much to keep it together. I've seen them collapse too many times this year.
I agree.
And while the Chiefs have put up their stinkers too, and found a way to win those games, and therefore they get the 1 seed and all of that, I don't know. I don't trust the Texans to like string a lot of consecutive successes together without having some kind of colossal screw up. And the Chiefs know how to punish that stuff. I'm still going a little bit with, playoff experience. All of the longtime Chiefs have been here every year, know exactly how to do it in the divisional round, coming off a nice rest. Everybody's bumps and bruises are a little better. I don't think I'm going to go there with you. I get it. I don't think it's a long shot by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think any of these games are major long shots. I think upsets happen in the divisional round for sure. Even Detroit and Washington, which we both agree is probably the least likely one, still certainly starts 0-0, and we'll all tune in and see what happens. But I can't bet against teams and specifically quarterbacks that have shown me a lot in the playoffs sustainably.
Well, that's always
Stafford and Mahomes for me.
That's the best bet to make. And that's why, they probably won't be a bunch of upsets, and we're kind of, shooting in the dark to a point. It's about what's most likely.
Well, two teams coming off a bye, huge advantage, home field, and favored.
Or I could argue, Luke, the Chiefs will be rusty because they haven't played in 2 weeks. And if the Texans come out playing with hair on fire because they just played a playoff game last week and they knock around Mahomes a little bit, get a turnover early, get a 10-0 lead, and the Texans can get it done. But I do want to say Jaden Daniels is the ultimate equalizer against the Detroit Lions. The Lions have had their struggles against mobile quarterbacks in the run game. Kyler Murray went for 45 yards. Josh Allen went for 60 and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Richardson went for 60 yards against them. Those teams, Buffalo is the only one to actually win those games, but the Cardinals only lost by 7 and it was close. I think a mobile quarterback, which Detroit has only seen a couple of weeks this year, could give that defense trouble if they're not getting pressure. And I think that game could be closer than people think. So in a surprise, I would actually say I have the Rams last on my list.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
I think Philly is going to smoke them. And I
think Philly's going to smoke them. Okay.
It goes
I will
Buffalo,
say to the rest
Texans,
point.
Commanders, Rams.
I will say to the rest point about the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
If this were their first time, if this were their first rodeo, I could see it. I could see that maybe with the Lions, right? Mm-hmm. Where they have the bye, they rest their starters, and then they don't quite know how to like manage that time properly so that they don't come out rusty. But the Chiefs have done this a bunch of times before, so I feel like they kind of know how to address that particular risk. But yeah, just for posterity, I think the Bills are the most likely underdog. We agree on that. And then I would go Rams, Texans, Commanders.
All right. Well, that's a good list right there. And on tomorrow's show, me and the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, are going to dive even deeper into this slate of divisional round games. But that's going to do it for us today. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast. Check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for the Brain, Luke Braun. We tell you every episode, stay safe out there.